Shall we keep
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 6th Board of Education meeting. Just to let people know that we were in executive session discussing personnel and contractual matters. Also want people to know that we are being videotaped, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is back there. Just looking for it.
One right there.
Oh, there's one there too. Oh, I'm looking at that one. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we'll start with introductions. I just want to let people know that Lynn Hart is out for personal reasons.
Kate Navarro,
Michael Cooper.
Jody Monroe,
Tom Douglas.
Diane Stever.
Matt Downey.
Laura Bierman,
Charmaine Widgesinger.
Judy Kehoe.
Okay. And then I would also, if we could do this, if somebody can make a motion, I'd like to put item 1F down after the presentations because Jody needs to leave early tonight. So,
moved.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries. So we will do approval of the minutes for the February 27th, 2013 regular board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry, any discussion first? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. And Student Senate report, I think I did see Jamie. There she is.
Hello. This has been a really busy couple of weeks for Senate, especially this week. We actually are helping to sponsor Rachel's Challenge, which is a program that is being run at the high school tomorrow, and it's about the power of one person's actions to help start a positive chain reaction and help prevent bullying in the school and encourage positive behavior. So I think it'll be a really exciting event, and there will be assemblies for all students in the morning, as well as a peer-led training session that all of the senators are participating in, as well as some of the other students. And that's how to be positive role models and to encourage a lack of bullying and positive behavior. So we're really excited about that. Also, Senate is hosting our snowball dance, which was postponed from a couple of weeks back with that snowstorm. So we're excited to get that on moving. And as well, we sponsored the Federal Challenge team. We're helping to pay their way down to New York City, and they're going in late March to compete. So it's been a busy couple of months, and we're looking for some more fundraisers and activities in the spring. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
Well, I think while you're there, if I may, if the board will allow me, because Jamie just mentioned on something on a federal trip for a competition that I think she's being a little modest because her, as well as Josh Stearns, Ian Masters, Philip Groegan, and Mataba Watersea are going to participate in the monetary policy competition of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York on March 20th, and that's what she was speaking to. So please congratulate Jamie as well as everyone else on that team. So thank you for representing.
Thank you. We're working hard, so we're excited. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. And I guess we'll go into the superintendent's report.
It's my pleasure to give a brief, somewhat brief report tonight with so many in attendance. It's really wonderful. So we need to do this every month. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Board of Education, faculty and staff who are here, as well as our students, it's my pleasure to announce that over the past weekends, the middle school and high school Science Bowl teams each competed. And in order to represent the rewards that come from students' hard work, I've asked both of the principals, Mr. Landry for Bethlehem Central High School and Mr. Klugman for Bethlehem Central Middle School, if they would come forward and present each of their teams to the Board of Education. And I would ask if the Board of Education can also form a receiving line for the students that they call forward for their accomplishments. Mr. Klugman?
Thank you. Just a real brief background on our high school team. I won't reveal how our high school team did, but our high school team has had a short history of doing very well in their competition. Miss Wood, Miss Lisa Wood, and Mr. Todd Tyler have been our coaches at the middle school for a number of years, and they've done a great job perpetuating that success at the high school. And this year, I'd like to welcome them up and have them introduce some of their students. We had 2 teams in our middle school competition this year. One of our teams came in first place, and the other team came in third place. So we're very excited not only for their success this year, but also for next year because we have a group of seasoned competitors. So I'd like to bring up at this time Miss Lisa Wood, who's a 7th grade science teacher, and Mr. Todd Tyler, who's one of our 8th grade science teachers.
We had a total of 10 students. I think today we have here about, 6 or 7 of them. So I'll introduce them. Alfonso Prieto. David Sasto. Seth Schoenblum. Li Chen Zhu. Alan Joe. That is our second team that finished third in a competition of 10. With our first place winners, and I've been doing this since 2002, so we've been competing for a long time. This is the first time that our middle school is there, so I'm proud of this group to make it to the top. Shamit Merendi, Roger Hope, Denali Relis. Bowen Chen. And one not present, Elliot Checkman. Congratulations. Everyone is present to Washington, D.C. to compete in a 4-day competition dealing with a lithium car race, that was a part of the regional competition as well, and Science Academic Bowl. There's approximately 120 teams that will be competing at the high school, middle school level nationally. Thank you very much.
Yep, I'll be right back.
What I will do in the meantime, I'm going to speak for Mr. Paul O'Reilly, our biology teacher, who could not be here tonight because of surgery on his knee. But if I could call up Jimmy Ding, Ian Masters, Jacob Wolfsberg, Satjeev Kanwar, and Ronald Shee, and then I'll give a little... Oh, don't go through the line yet. We have to wait for Dr. Douglas. I'll stand there and I'll talk about you. So very briefly, this team was at the GE R&D Center in Niskayuna in a tournament that was hosted by GE and Knowles Atomic Power Lab. And this team went undefeated in 12 matches to win the tournament, and therefore they are moving on to the National Science Bowl in Washington, D.C. in late April. So congratulations and well done, and thank you for representing our school so well.
I'd like to thank our high school administration, our middle school administration, and as well as their staff for making these opportunities available and working so hard with our students. As you can see, these are examples of what happens when motivation and initiative get together, and the outcomes obviously lead to participation and success. So I'd like to thank all of them on behalf of the entire Board of Education as well as myself. In addition, ladies and gentlemen, this past weekend I had the pleasure of doing a couple things. I had the pleasure of putting my stripes on that I used to, how would you say, officiate or try to officiate if somebody watches, a basketball game on behalf of the Bethlehem Central Community Foundation, fundraiser of the faculty versus faculty basketball game. And it was a wonderful event with a wonderful crowd, and I want to commend those that were responsible for putting it together, and also for the efforts to help from the foundation support our educational programs as well as our students here at Bethlehem Central. Additionally, on Saturday, March 2nd, 92 teams competed on 6 long-term problems and 1 spontaneous problem in the annual Odyssey of the Mind Region 7 tournament. We were definitely a team to contend with throughout the competition, and we were one of the larger teams. The highlights of the evening is that we had 1 team from Eagle Elementary, I believe, take first place and will be competing in the state competition, as well as a number of other winners, and third place finish, I believe, by Hammergrell 3rd grade, and a lot of opportunities, and had a chance to speak with many of the parents as well as the students, and all had a good time and gave up so much of their time throughout the year. So I commend the individuals, and this is a parent-run sponsorship for the countless number of hours that are dedicated to the students' success. This afternoon, I'd like to ask Ms. Painter to stand and be recognized for her department, as well as any of our other art staff that are here for Bethlehem Central. Could you please stand at this time? Oh, go ahead and stand and keep standing. That's wonderful. It's always nice when you're telling the accomplishments of the district and there's individuals here that actually make it happen, which is really nice. Today was sort of a very fast-paced trip for myself. I know Mr. Downey also accompanied me down at lunchtime, but the Bethlehem Central School District was participating in the first Capitol Repertory Theater Student Art Exhibition down at the Capitol, as well as, I believe, the 3rd through 8th grade art exhibition for the Capitol as well. It is K-8 show. K-8. Yes. I keep getting that K out of there. I'm sorry about that. What happened was is at about 12:30, we had 2 students who were being highlighted from the high school in the New York State Art Teachers Association exhibition. And these were also sponsored by Mrs. Painter, so I want to thank you for making that available to our students. And then at about 3 o'clock, we had to rush back down there for the K through 8 show, and there was roughly, I think, 50 entries in that, and that will be on display until the 15th of March, correct?
Yes, and they're also working on a Facebook page to some of those images right on our website.
And the artistic work was outstanding, and we'd like to commend you and the entire art department for your hard work in making our students shine. So thank you. In addition, I'd like to offer congratulations to Grenmont 3rd grader Maria Procobra for being named the grand prize winner of the House of the Future 2050 art contest at the Great Northeast Home Show. The contest invited children in grade K through 6 to submit a drawing of a home in the year 2050. As a grand prize winner, Maria received a $250 Hannaford gift card for Glenmont School and a $100 Visa gift card for herself. We'd like to congratulate Maria, her instructor, as well as her family for representing us in such a fine way. Hammergrell Kindergarten Family Math and Science Night will be held at Hammergrell on Thursday, March 21st, 6:30 to 8 p.m. This evening is fun and hands-on experience and math activities you and your kindergartners to explore. I had the fortunate opportunity to attend their PTA meeting impromptu last night, and when I drove by, I have to say, the parking lot was absolutely full, and I'm like, what are they doing to bring this many people out on a night for a PTA meeting? They didn't even know I was coming. But as I rounded a corner to go into the building, what was astonishing was they were not only having a book sale, but they were also doing the Hammergrell PTA family game night, which brought in a lot of individuals. And when we attended the PTA meeting, it was attended by over 25 individuals as well. This shows the dedication and spirit towards education of our community, and I know that's the same at each of our PTAs and the work that they do. Couple final notes is Slingerlands went Seuss last Friday in celebration of Dr. Seuss's birthday and Read Across America. If you want to see a picture of the Slingerlands principal, Heidi Bonnequist, dressed as Cat in the Hat, visit the Slingerlands website. I can even guess that the Cat in the Hat also was featured in the wacky basketball game, so the cat is definitely getting around. Ladies and gentlemen, these are just a few of some of the strong highlights that are here at Bethlehem Central day in and day out throughout the educational year for our students. I would like to remind everybody that tomorrow evening is the Rachel Challenge presentation to the high school community as well as the community at large. I believe it's 7 o'clock in the auditorium, and all are welcome to come out. We'll also be doing that presentation to the students at the high school in the morning. So I want to thank the staff as well as those that are supporting it through outside donations for their generous gifts to bring this outstanding opportunity to our students about making our choices and knowing that we all matter and that we need to look out for each other. Thank you very much, and that concludes my report for tonight, March 6, 2013.
Thank you. Okay, next we have our Board of Education report. Matt?
Last Thursday, there was a Capital Area School District Board Association meeting. The meeting consisted of a panel of 5 of our local legislators, Senator Breslin and Assemblywoman Fahey, representing both of them representing our district, were there. It was good to hear them speak. They talked about how they would like to see some restoration to the state aid, especially the gap elimination to address that, and also the high tax aid that has been cut. And they've sent a letter to the governor and the legislative leaders encouraging them to restore some of that funding. So that was a good thing to hear.
Anyone else?
I visited 3 lab school classrooms on Monday. Mr. Greco's participation in government class, Mr. Mitchell's Spanish 2 class, and I neglected to write down the gentleman's name who teaches science, Jody, at the lab school science instructor. Do you happen to know?
It could have been Mr. Argas, Conis.
Okay. I don't know if it was him. Okay, but and had a great time observing the students doing their work, participating in small group work, using their technology. So it was a great visit. I did sit with Mr. Smith and encouraged him. I guess there was a meeting for lab school parents Monday night. I said it's always great to have parents come to board meetings as we discuss the program. And I don't think Mr. Smith could be here tonight. So is Mrs. Hines here?
I saw her.
Oh,
Mr. Smith
there's
is
Steve.
here.
Okay. Said they would be here in case board members had any questions about the lab school. I also went to a parent meeting on college choice and stress in college students that was done by a community group, and Mr. Scott Carlton was one of the keynote sort of facilitators. He presented a lot of good information, but also allowed parents to talk about their concerns and their experiences. It was a great 1-hour session, and I learned quite a bit. And lastly, I noticed when I was pumping gas that Ellesmere is partnering with the Stewarts that is closest to them for the first half of this month to raise funds for their playground. It's a matching donations. I think is a great example of school business partnership. And for the smallest elementary school in our district, they have raised almost $60,000.
Great. Anyone else? Okay, so we are going to go to the presentations. And I think, is Jody going to start, or Judy? Okay, you're going to start. And then the one thing I did forget to mention was for our participation in government students, if we're still going past 9, we will take a break at 9, and you can come up and sign out.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Board of Education, we start off our second of 3 presentations on the 2013-2014 budgetary process. We'd like to start out with the outline for tonight's topic. As we do with each and every board meeting, we try to recap the budget development process. Tonight also we'll be hearing information on our technology portions of our budget, which are also some of the portions that people have had questions on in relationship to technology that is in the bond that would be coming up in a week from now, as well as the instructional program tonight, which we presented by Ms. Monroe, and then also to look at potential questions for decisions to be considered going forward. Please understand that we have one more budgetary event, which is March 20th, that will help to conclude our first flush look at all potential options. It is really important to note that these are options for the Board of Education to consider as we get to the process's culmination point, which will probably be in April. And the reason for this is because of the fact that currently we have a projected state budget. With all intents and purposes, the budget is supposed to be done by the 21st or roughly in that time frame. So to make the best decisions that we can, and as a board, to make our best recommendations to the board, we really want to know where our final monetary picture is. So at this time, it's still speculative, but we have some good ideas and concepts of how it could play out, at least what we believe as the worst case scenario with the governor's position of his budget at this point. So to start tonight off, we have our state aid picture, and I'll jump back in here, but I'd like to introduce our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Judy Kehoe, to continue the presentation.
This presentation tonight is not a test of your short-term memory skills. You may recall about a month ago when I was doing the presentation on the state aid update, I had indicated that we thought we had final numbers, at least as it related to how the state aid affected our tax cap calculations. I have breaking news this evening that we do have a slight change in that. We have a slight change in the tax cap calculations because of a change in the way building aid is calculated. Back in 2001, the legislature enacted a change in the laws that kicked in effect 10 years in the future. So that actually was effective for this fiscal year. It resulted in a change in how they calculate the interest rates on capital projects. And what they would do is look at those interest rates and recalculate it if in fact the market had gone lower. And in fact, you know what interest rates are like today. The statewide average interest rate is decreased and it has gone down to 2.375. What the state is doing is recalculating the building aid using these lower interest rate numbers. Now, a month ago when we talked about this, we were directed to use the numbers off the governor's aid run because we thought those were the best figures that we had at the time. About 2 days ago, they announced that they had these figures for us after all. So what I wanted to do was update our state aid totals so that we use that decrease in state aid. This slide has been updated so that our building aid is lowered by $64,000. That's the impact on the portion of bonds that are affected by this change in the calculation methodology. So that really brings our budget to budget reduction to $939,000 less in state aid based on our projections of what we can expect to get. The way this affects the tax cap calculation, there is no change in the majority of these factors. It still has the standard tax-based growth factors, pilot information. But if you go to the next slide, the italicized line is the capital exemptions for the current budget year, and that number is in fact higher by the $64,000. So because we're getting less in aid, it translates into a slight increase in our property tax cap calculation. So our maximum allowable tax levy, where originally we thought this was going to be finalized at 3.64%, has increased to 3.75%. Now, the bottom line on what this means to the gaps that were presented, originally we had shown that this was going to be about $4.9 million. Because of that reduction in the state aid, it lowers our revenue totals, thereby increasing our baseline gap of just over $5 million. However, because of the increase in the maximum allowable tax levy, should the board choose to go to that 3.75%, you generate additional taxes. So the initial gap after applying that Mattel is just under $2.8 million. If we opt to use $1.75 million in fund balance, it brings us back to about the same number that was there originally, which is the $1,044,000.
Thank you, Ms. Kehoe. I'll give that mic back to you in just a second. Ladies and gentlemen, the question is as you look at this, we started out telling you where our budget gap would be, our budget differentials, and so forth, as well as the projected tax levy limit last time of roughly around 3.64. But one of the areas that we missed, and we forgot that we left it out of the first presentation, so we want to update it. And honestly, it's nice that we're updating it tonight because I believe there was only about 5 members of our community here, and I'd rather get more people to understand it, is that if you look at the range of reductions needed with varying tax levies, this chart would be where the district is sitting right now. And it has a couple points to be very particular about. Currently, we have a budget gap of $5 million. It's a difference of $60,000 from where we initially started. But in order to close that gap without changing anything in our educational system and also keeping the financial stability of our reserve and our fund balance, which is our emergency money, on hand, and using no amount of self-support to prop up the budget and close that gap of $5 million, we would need essentially a tax levy of around 8.46 to meet that spending plan with no reductions and no support. That probably would not necessarily be supported anywhere at this point. It's difficult. However, people do understand that. And probably if people were honest and said, I'd rather do that, but it's just not feasible. We understand that too, and I think this board is very cognizant of that. Well, then what happens is we also have to look at what would be the next level. If we still use what little financial monetary resources that we have in our fund balance or unrestricted reserves and use $1.75 million to prop up the budget. In other words, we're creating our own hole for next year by doing so and use that fund balance. Then to cover that same amount with no reductions in service or no cuts to our programmatic offerings of the budget that's submitted, we would now, because of that support of the fund balance, require about a 5.51% levy. Again, I will speculate you're going to see levies in this area of that rate because of the histrionics of the fact that we've been going through 4 years of cuts now. So that's not out of the ballpark, but for us, if the board ever considered that, that would be a second year of challenging the tax levy limit, which presents its own problems as well. We were fortunate with a gracious community last year because the cuts were being at a level that were on top of challenging the level. We were reducing our programmatic offerings by almost $3.2 to $3.3 million. So what happens is this year is sort of like round 2 of understanding the tax levy system. And what that does is this orange line is what's known as, we call it the Mattel, the maximum allowable tax levy limit. The reason why you hear Mattel is so that we don't have to say those words over and over again. But what that means is that under the governor's regulation and law, the formula that Judy has shown and that was just up here, that tells us what is the limit that requires a 50% vote. In a way, that was the intention, is that there is a maximum amount that the governor, when he proposed the legislation, said should be an acceptable amount. And that is the maximum that you should be raising without getting supermajority. It doesn't mean you have to raise it, but it does mean that according to the rules and parameters that are out there, that's probably the most expectation when they put this law into effect. What that means is using now, I won't keep repeating this, but the 1.75 million in support of the budget, this maximum allowable levy will allow us to raise about $2 million of our $5 million initial gap, which means that when you look at it, the amount of gap we have to close using both of those tools, and those are really the only tools that we have at our disposal, besides additional state aid, we would still have to, with this budget, reduce our programmatic offerings or budgetary offerings by roughly $1.044 million. Now, one of the things we did last year is we also showed you what monetary amounts were needed, because the farther we go lower than this Mattel, we have to make up in either support of the fund balance, which we should really not be above that. We should actually be decreasing that at this point. But at 3%, say that's where we ended up, that it needed to be 3%, from our same budget at this point, we'd only raise 1.7 million. We still have the 1.75, but now, rather than being at the Mattel where it's $1 million in reductions, now it's 1.48 or $1.5 million of reductions. Each time these reductions go up, it becomes harder and harder to support our programmatic offerings, because the district has already reduced over 120 positions over the past 4 years, and they virtually have eliminated most of the additionals, to the point we were trimming some of the excess around the sides. And I would like to say, we're not trying to make it too easy for anyone. We're trying to do the best and most reasonable, most fiscal plan on behalf of the Board of Education and the administration for the community, for Bethlehem to have the education that Bethlehem is known for. Each year it becomes harder and harder. No one this year expected that we would probably see a fourth year of reductions in the amount of $1 million. Honestly, when we laid out our budget plan from last year, we expected it at best, at worst, to be flat state aid. Now, there's a lot that can be done. So when you look at this, each of the numbers, again, goes down, so I won't really capitulate it more across the board. But the worst thing that you've got to be aware of is if a budget is presented the first time and it's successful, the budgeting process is over. If the budget is presented, and that's the hard part that the board has to balance, and that's why the budgeting takes so long, and we're not to decisions yet. But if by chance that first budget is unsuccessful, the district has one opportunity and one opportunity only, 30 days later, to present another budget that must be acceptable to the community, because if it is not, you face one of the two bottom scenarios. Because the law has its real teeth in the fact that if the community says no to two budgets that are presented, the community gets a contingency budget automatically. And that contingency budget means you're not allowed to increase your budget from year to year, so no additional taxes. So that's, right now we're starting at $5 million, minus 0 means we still have $5 million left to cut. The board will then have the ability to use between 0 and $1.75 million to support it, which would leave somewhere between $3.2 million to cut and $5 million to cut. I can tell you, on behalf of the administration, this area will damage irreparably the district for the foreseeable future and possibly going forward forever, unless something happens at the governmental level for support of educational funding. That's why our budgetary process are often seen as the most important, because this is the only New York State public budget that is voted on by the constituents of the local district. The board proposes a budget. The district itself, the district's residents, always decide for the school. It's never my final decision. It's never the board's final decision. It's our recommendations. And that's how it is in New York State. A town has different rules, and definitely we know we don't get to vote on the state budget. But that's the importance of why these meetings need to be attended, and we want to thank you for coming out this evening. So that's sort of the picture in the long run of where we could be without any cuts to where we could be if we had to make all the cuts. And that's the difficulty of what will happen over the next month. Any questions on this from the board, just this slide here? That's great.
Tom, I would just point out that the $1 million gap at the Mattel is roughly equal to our reduction in state aid.
Yes. If you look at it right now, if we had flat state aid, we probably would have been at the Mattel with a zero number here with this fund balance. Different projections. That's where we thought we would be. Nobody wants to make reductions, but if we have to try to do it as surgically as possible to try to maintain our programmatic offerings and the excellence that's been known as Bethlehem education. So that's the hard part. The difficult part is making sure people understand that of this 3.75%, 3% entirely is because of the way New York State requires school districts to fund retirement. For any employee, it does not matter. That's outside of the board's control, it's outside of the community's control, it's outside of anybody that works in this district's control. That was established over 30 years ago by the legislature, and it's basically a mandate that is driving some of our difficulties. There's nothing anyone in Bethlehem or this board can do to offset that. So roughly, our change from budget year to budget year is about programmatic-wise 0.75%, and that's to keep us from cutting roughly another $400,000 on top of this 1.044. So that's the difference in the budget outlay. So we want to get to the heart of the matter at this point.
Tom, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I just wanted to clarify the $5 million gap that we supposedly have. Last week you did present a couple of additions to the budget as well as you're going to talk about them this time.
Yep.
No, with the $5 million gap, does that include any of the proposed additions you're thinking about, or is it strictly just the exact budget of this year to next year?
This gap includes every one of our additions that are proposed. So as you see the presentations, that's based off of our total budget, because it's hard to present a budget and then say, we're going to add this. We'd rather have the budget and know that the ads are in there and then display them as ads as well so everybody knows.
So what would be the actual budget to budget?
How
much of that is addition?
The addition, if just let me do it real quick. I think it's 200, 300, 342, 542, about $620,000, I believe.
Of additions?
Yes.
And so if you took off the 620,000, whatever you just said,
right,
then you would have literally the same exact programs, the same exact teacher configurations, the same exact everything as last year's budget.
Yeah, there's about a 1% if you use tax levy. Tax levy is about $600,000. It's about 1%. And what those additions are the fact that $200,000, and you'll see that tonight, is based on a new mandate that's coming out from the state. About $180,000 of that is about addressing a long-time issue that the district's had with its BC at Home, student management, parent portal, and student information system that we have to also accurately report data to the district warehouse. So that's also sort of a pseudo mandate. The Ames Web and SRI is roughly about another $50,000 in there. And then there's about $100,000 that we heard from the facility bond discussions that the community said we need to start addressing instead of deferring. So that's mostly, I believe, all the ads. So it's not fluff or it's not new programs, it's things that we're either going to have to do and take from someplace else, and we felt we're at a point where we're taking so much that we had to propose the overall budget. Yes.
It might be helpful in the, I don't know if it's in the the next 2-week one or the following meeting, just like we're going to have a list of all the possible cuts to look at.
We'll
it would be good to have a
ads.
summary of all the additions that you've proposed as well.
Yes, I think that's fine, and that's what we're trying to do with each of the presentations, so that will be well noted.
And just one other clarification on the use of fund balance, that's the district's recommendation right now, but the use of fund balance could really be from 0 to whatever amount that the board will be discussing over the course of the next few weeks.
If it goes higher than that, it would put our fund balance, I believe, down to around less than 2%, which would be very unlikely and wise because of any emergent need. Preferably, our goal was to get that to $1 million to $1.3 million this year. We're extending that a little, which we want to be careful. But it's a decision that doesn't need to be made now. It's just, it gives us our starting point. And then any fluctuation of these numbers will ultimately change the gap.
Sure, but so over the course of the week,
Yes.
the board will be discussing and deciding with
Correct.
your recommendation how much
Yeah, I
fund
think
balance
that
to apply.
discussion will really happen probably around April 17th, but it will give you enough time to respond to that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, as we go from here, the next area, I'm going to turn back over to our Chief Financial Officer as she updates on some of the areas of potential reductions that we've already covered from the past presentation. Oh, you bypassed one. I just looked at two.
It's too quick for me. This is just a quick recap for everybody of where we left off as of our February 27th meeting. That was the evening where we had a review from Greg Nolte for operations and maintenance, and then from John DeMeo for athletics. And one of the potential reductions that we listed was the $100,000 for the capital outlay. That's what Dr. Douglas was just referencing as one of our ads that came from our discussions with the facility forums. And then the other area that was put up as a potential reduction was about $94,000, and that represented some other savings in the budget that were used to fund other initiatives, things that had been deferred over the last few years. But if we needed to, we could defer another year and then take that as a reduction from the budget. Under athletics, where we currently have 4 levels of sports for many of the programs, we were proposing that we could reduce that down to 3 levels, and that would generate about a $70,000 reduction in those budget totals. All right, Tom, you're clicking. I'm not
I got you.
Okay. What we wanted to present was what were some of the items that we had looked at last year as some of our deepest cuts, that if it was necessary, if the board decided based on community feedback and their discussions that we did not want to levy taxes at the Mattel and we wanted to go to a lower amount, what might some of those other reductions be that we would consider? And one of them is a 1.0 FTE for a supervisor in the operations and maintenance department, and that would be about a $100,000 reduction in the budget. And then the other option on athletics would be to drop from potentially 3 levels on some of the sports down to 2 levels, and that would be another $80,000. So that would cumulatively provide another $180,000 that would help close those gaps to get us
Judy,
to
if
a
I may,
balanced budget.
real quick, just so that everybody understands that these additional potential reductions have not been prioritized or looked at in any way, shape, or form. These are options that have come forward from either our administrative supervisors in that area, our administrative teams, and principals as well. But just because you're seeing these, again, we need to emphasize, it does not mean that these are going to happen. It does not mean that they're the highest priority or the lowest priority. It just means they enter into the discussion.
Can I ask a couple questions on that first?
If she can go back.
Is that all right? First, reducing sports from 4 levels to 3 levels, and we've talked about this before, but I don't remember exactly. You talked about how this is being discussed at either the suburban council or the sectional level, and you know, because if some schools are dropping certain sports and other ones, I mean, it should be a coordinated approach. And I know that you said they are discussing it at that level, and I just wondered if you had any idea when you thought people might be coming to some kind of consensus on this, or is it going to be in time for any kind of budgetary decisions?
Ms. Marion, you asked probably one of the most controversial questions there are right now, because I would love to be able to say that it is being talked about. It is being talked about. However, everybody's waiting for everybody else to blink. The one thing I can say about the 3 levels, the 4 levels to 3 levels, is that several schools independently have already made it at different levels in different sports programs, depending on interest levels and so forth. However, a majority of them, this year especially, have that in their information, but I can't release it because they haven't come to their decisions just like this board. Pretty much everybody's holding that off. There seems to be some reluctance at the Suburban Council of Athletics and Section 2 on trying to get together on a unified front. There have been histrionics of this in the past where superintendents have attended the meetings and the athletic directors and superintendents can't all get on the same wavelength. One is because of seniorities, new people to the area, like I would be considered relatively new, although I probably wouldn't keep my mouth shut if somebody said, sit down. It's just that it's probably one of the most difficult things when you're dealing with the overall system. I would probably say, and I'll use this because we talked about it last year, gymnastics. Gymnastics is a situation right now that there's only 4 teams in the entire section, and a section cannot have a sport without 4 teams. If any team drops out, and my discussions are that others are looking at those types of programs, not specifically gymnastics, but those that have minimum enrollments, that it could be after the budget season that one drops out and so forth. We just try to get the accurate information as possible. The second level or potential below Mattel, that would probably be difficult. There's not many schools, I think there's 1 or maybe 2 that only do 2 levels, and they use their community to fund all of their feeder levels. So this is why this one would probably be down lower, just because of the fact we have a tremendous amount of participation throughout all of our levels, and that would pretty much leave all the athletic competitions at most likely the high school level.
Is that item for all sports, or is that just a reduction in certain of sports from 3 to 2?
This monetary amount would be needed from all sports that have a third level.
Yeah. And the other question I have on the supervisor, does that include all fringe and benefits and everything?
That includes their benefit in there as well.
Everything's in there.
Yeah. This does as well, because we calculated burden and everything in the chart that we gave you last week as well.
I just want to follow up on the athletic question, because I think I understand it from what Laura's question was, but because you had before some sports going from 4 to 3 and now it's 3 to 2, basically regardless of whether we currently have 4 or 3 levels, this additional savings and the previous amount would basically allow for 2 levels of sports across the board, regardless of what the current, if we're going to have 4 currently or 3 currently, is basically going to 2 levels of sports across the board.
Correct.
Okay.
If that was something that was selected. Our issue here now is that we haven't made any recommendations on this. These are things that we had last year in our budget. We're reminding everybody because it's hard to put it up in one budget and then maybe not have it up in this budget. There are items that you will see tonight or in our next presentation that have been happening for 2-3 years. That's the hard part because we're also dealing with people that have been on edge for 2 and 3 years.
Sure.
Okay? Yeah, we're done.
At this point, I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Technology, Sam Fian.
Good evening, board members, community members, colleagues. This evening I'd like to give you an overview of the proposed technology budget for the 13-14 school year. Before I give you some numbers and metrics, I just wanted to kind of give you an overview or a highlight of what we actually do here. We maintain all the district-wide and building-level networks. We support over 5,000 user devices, iPads, laptops, printers, smartboards, a number of different devices that our teachers use instructionally in the classroom. We maintain all the telecommunication systems, all the phone systems used for communication within the district is our responsibility. And we support not only the student information system, but all the associated management information systems, HealthMaster and all the FitnessGram, many others that integrate into the student information system, provide kind of the essential repository for all the data that the district uses. That also includes integrating to other systems that we're now currently using through some of the unfunded mandates you've heard for assessment, Linkit and AIMSweb. We interface our data to those systems externally as well. We maintain 60 servers, backup and file servers, and a number of other equipment in our operations center. And we certainly research, purchase, go out for competitive quotes and bids, and distribute all the technology, hardware, and supplies. And last, but certainly not least, we strive, when possible, to provide professional development and user training so that we can maximize our return on investment of our technology dollars. To continue a couple of selected highlights, here's a couple metrics for you. Last year we handled about 4,400 service tickets. This year we're on track to handle about 3,800. On the surface you'd think that that's a diminished amount of capacity that we've serviced, but what's happened over the last few years is we've restructured the department. We put into effect systems that allow us to remotely configure and manage and be proactive about how we support the district's technology. So thus, the workload hasn't decreased necessarily, but we've been able to proactively address a lot of the issues that users have before many of them even know they're going to occur. So we're very proud of that metric that you see up there. The other thing that we instituted this year is our student help desk. And I look out and I see a couple of our students who participate in that program here this evening. Our student help desk, which is new this school year, handled to date about 250 service tickets, and they're on track to support about 300, which constitutes about a third of the service requests that we get here in the high school. That has been a tremendous, tremendous program for many reasons, and really the effort is a collaborative effort between supervisors, school leadership, the students, the teachers that have those students, and the tech department. This is the team for this year. We have, I think, 14 total, one young lady in there, which we're proud of. But it's important to know that if you recall, for any of you that were there last year, we introduced this concept as a vision last year during budget season. And I recall when there was a student sitting in the front row, I think he was a senior, and said, boy, he got up to the public microphone and said, I wish that program was here when I was able to take advantage of it. And we brought that to fruition this year, and again, through the efforts of the people that I mentioned. So now to the numbers. Year to year, our salaries have gone down a little bit. We're going to show you a more detailed slide as to why that has occurred. But year to year, we're actually at about $500,000 for our proposed salaries for next year. Our equipment, you're going to see a huge jump there. And Dr. Douglas alluded to the primary reason for that. The state has imposed upon us a major unfunded mandate, not just us, but all the school districts in the state, to move towards an online assessment testing model beginning next school year and being in full force for the following year. That has huge, huge budget implications for us. The state also provided us a technology readiness tool, a tool that they provided all districts to be able to assess their readiness for this new unfunded mandate. We ran that tool, and that tool takes a look at your infrastructure, your bandwidth, the assets that you own, the computers, the laptops. And as we have done a preliminary analysis based on the information that we know today, because the state still has not committed to the standards that they're going to be using for next year. They are a member of an organization called PARC, the Partnership for the Assessment of Readiness of College and Career, but they have not yet adopted that as their standard. They, the preliminary gap analysis puts us at needing between $400,000 and $800,000 of equipment to meet that mandate as it's written today. If we use just the conservative estimate on the low side of $400,000 and we divide that by the 2 years that we need to prepare and be in full strength for that, there's where you get your $200,000 increase in equipment. Software, year to year, that's a state reimbursed allocation that goes down just slightly based on our student enrollment going down next year. Materials and supplies, a slight uptick, which relates again to another unfunded mandate. Our printing demands have increased based on the assessments that we're doing. Currently, because we're not able to take full advantage of our online assessment technology, we are still doing bubble sheet assessments through the system Linkit, and that has required us to do a lot more printing than we had expected last year. That was actually a previous decrease last year, but we've had to bring that back up in our recommendation. Technology purchase services remains about flat, and then we get to the BOCES line, which is yet another huge increase in our proposal. That predominantly is made up of 3 components. Dr. Douglas alluded to one of them. We desperately need a new student information system here. It is the foundation of our accountability. Again, a pseudo unfunded mandate by the state. The information that we're required to provide the state through the data warehouse is kept in our student information system that is no longer meeting our district needs. For those of you who are perhaps frustrated with BC at Home as a parent portal, that was a wonderful product that we had written in-house, but through deferred maintenance and lack of ongoing development of that product, it has probably reached its useful life. I bet there's no one in the room that would argue with that fact with me. We do not currently use an electronic gradebook, and we know that to engage parents in the conversation between school and home, those elements are sorely missed here in the district. So a new student information system that would bring about those components would be well received. In addition to those unfunded mandates for online testing, bandwidth is of consideration as well, or of concern, and we would have to update or increase our internet bandwidth to provide for that online testing program as well. And last but not least, and this is an important element that ties into next week's budget or bond vote, and that is we have experienced over the last couple of years a significant increase in our operational costs to support our legacy hardware. That hardware that I mentioned a year ago that is hit end of service support, end of service life, we are seeing 200–300% increases in service contracts on that very critical equipment because we've waited, in a sense, deferred its replacement. We are now putting good money into that old equipment, and that is something that makes that number as well. So the total proposed budget is just over $2 million. I should note at this point, Ms. Moreau and I were at a DayTag meeting not too long ago where Ken Wagner, the Deputy Commissioner of the state, suggested that school districts earmark about 5% of their operational budget for technology. We're at about 2.2%. I don't know where the state gets those numbers, where they think their reality really exists, but their recommendation is that districts should be setting aside 5% of their operational budget. Let's go to a detailed slide that gives you a little bit bigger picture of the staffing. So we have about 9 employees in our department. We're down an FTE from a couple years ago, but we have 9 employees. Of the 9, 7.9 are funded through the general fund. 1 FTE is funded through the Special Education Support Services Department, and 10% of my salary is reimbursed through BOCES for us participating in the Model Schools program. So we support 7.9 of the 9 FTEs in our department, which constitutes our recommendation next year for $480,000. Every year, a question is usually asked about summer and extra help. In an IT industry, a lot of what we do can't happen during normal operational hours, or we need service or maintenance windows. Summertime is the best time that we have as a school district downtime to be able to upgrade our systems and maintain them and get more useful life out of them. And so we typically leverage college and or high school interns to come back in and supplement my staff so that we can get all the work necessary for the teachers to come back in August and be prepared for the next school year. And should we migrate to a new student information system next year, there's going to be a lot of work ahead of us to get the training and systems in place for that to take place. And to offer just a potential discussion point on the Mattel, we could take that $200,000 back out. But what that means is if indeed next year we need to be ready for the unfunded mandate that the state has placed on us, we could be looking at a $400,000 impact and be even less prepared to be able to absorb that into next year's budget. But that is certainly a potential. And then our last slide, I alluded to this earlier, we are down 1 FTE from several years ago. Anytime you're down staff, even though we feel that we've become much more efficient with the staff that we have added a large number of assets over the last couple of years at the middle school, in particular at the elementary school, a bunch of iPads, and we need people on the ground to be able to support that. So when you reduce staff, ultimately you're reducing your ability to support the program in an expeditious manner. Again, equipment replacement reductions, deferred equipment has led to higher maintenance costs. We are putting a lot of good money into old equipment rather than upgrading our equipment. And what the administrative staff heard loud and clear at all the facilities forums was we want to get back to, rather than having large bond initiatives every so many years, Let's get back to a replacement cycle that's reasonable, that can be handled through your annual operating budget, and let's get back on that cycle. So that was something that we would like to realize as a vision too. So the last note that I have is the only other consideration that is very serious is that for some reason, if our budget vote is unsuccessful next week, if the outcome is not favorable, that will have ramifications on this budget, and purchases that we anticipated making through that bond initiative, for instance, infrastructure upgrades, wireless at the middle school, all things that are going to be absolutely unequivocally needed to do the online testing program, that will somehow have to fall back into the annual operating budget, which then means that could impinge on program reductions as well. So I'll open it up for questions.
If I can clarify that statement there, what Sal is trying to say is that we have to say that we're fortunate that we do have a bonding situation going forward. If anybody doesn't know, next Tuesday, 7 to 9 at night, please make sure your friends, neighbors come out to vote. That's the biggest thing. You have to understand that that bonding situation allows us to possibly address some of these issues that the state is putting upon not just us, every single district. We just have potentially a mechanism to help strengthen our budgetary needs down the road, because within the next 2 years, that infrastructure item Sal was just talking about would have to be addressed in order to meet that requirement. It may not be out of this budget, but we would have to prepare if we do not have the ability to fund that in next year's budget, definitely on the infrastructure. And I think that's what Sal was trying to say.
I have a question just on that point, just to clarify, or pose a question to you. If the first referendum is successful, would this presentation change at all?
No.
Okay.
So, yeah. There is nothing included in this presentation that is redundant in the bond vote on Tuesday.
Okay. However, if the first referendum is not successful, then you would have to come back with different recommendations.
Sure. A good example would be, we don't, for all intents and purposes, have a wireless network that's adequate at the middle school. We could not provide an online testing situation next school year at the middle school should that bond be unsuccessful.
Just two other quick questions. So obviously the students who work the help desk are not paid.
They are not. This is all volunteer. They are scheduled through free periods in their day, and I believe they receive some CEIP credit or do their internship hours through that program.
And the third point that you were talking about, the BOCES services, I'm not that tech savvy, so just to get a better grip on that, you said talked about increase the service contracts on old equipment. At what point, or at some time in the future, could you give us an analysis at what point does the money we're spending on service contracts for old equipment outweigh the cost of getting new equipment? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, if Tom doesn't hook me off stage, I'll give you one quick example. Is that okay? If anyone was here through the facilities forums, you heard me talking about our core network switches, the brains of our operations. We have two, one here, one at the middle school. Great example. Each of those 2 years ago cost us, combined cost us about $9,600 in support. Last year alone, that went from $9,600 to $28,000 for supporting those two end-of-life, out-of-service switches. This year it's gone up to $38,000. So if you do the math real quick, we have spent approximately $50,000 more than we would have had to if we would had the fiscal ability to replace that 2 years ago. So that's one small example.
How much would that switch be, roughly?
Our core network upgrade total, I don't have a number on that switch, our total core upgrade is about $200,000 district-wide.
So we're spending about a quarter of that right now,
Conservatively.
almost every year.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Tom, can I ask you, I think probably more you,
Sure.
the question, and not necessarily on this, but on the bond, which
Sure.
triggered a question for me. I thought that if the bond were to pass next week, we would not be financing any of that until the following year, so that any tax increase to the residents would not be felt this year, would happen in the next budget.
What
Wait,
happens?
wait, I'm not done.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So if that's the case, though, would the work that Sal's talking about being done next year, still be done next year? Or would that be put off another year, the wireless upgrade in the middle school and all? Is it just that we can get the work done, but the financing doesn't happen until the following year?
What happens is there is phasing in any bond. So what happens is the district would have access to what's known as a bond anticipation note, or a BAN. And that would be set up so that there can be draws upon it. We do not, if we're successful, we may have some projects that may be able to move forward a little this summer, but it would not be the full course of the bond.
Right.
But you would start having that bond anticipation note to have the ability upon successful completion, and once the work is certified and signed off on, those funds could be released. So it's like taking a home equity loan. I have a $10,000, I'm not using it, but then all of a sudden, my wife's getting a little picky, she wants something done in the mudroom, it's $1,000 this week, and then next week, it's nothing, but 3 weeks out, it's another $4,000. That's how a bond anticipation note would run and work itself up to the final closeout, which would be the full bond.
So just to make sure that I understand exactly what you're saying, we could start the work, we would be taking out the bond come this summer on some of the items, but people would not see the increase in their taxes until the September 2014 tax bill?
Correct. That's the purpose of having that bond anticipation note, so that you don't try to do multiple calculations and stage up, but you have the ability, and then all at once the bond becomes part of the debt service.
Okay, thank you.
And now I'd like to turn it over to our Assistant Superintendent, Ms. Jody Monroe.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. It's great to see such a large crowd. So I'm going to talk about the instructional program, which is a very large program, obviously, in the district. There, up here on the slide, what you have is this year's current budget and next year's potential budget. And I just want to highlight a few areas. This includes overall salary, supplies, equipment, textbook, anything that falls in the instructional program. You can see that most of the areas are relatively flat. The salaries, we did have negotiations with the BCTA last year, and we ended up getting a very good deal with that, and our salaries reflect that in all of our line items. So the salary decrease in the actual areas in the K-12 budget, most of those are due to breakage, meaning people retire perhaps, and we hire newer faculty, newer staff. Obviously that results in lower overall salary. One of the areas you'll see an increase in is in in-service training, and we had several areas that were part of in-service professional development, so that's not really an increase, it's actually a reallocation of line items that we had in many different areas that we grouped into one area to make it a little easier to keep track of. And one area we had a decrease in is in our home instruction, and that's due to 2 years ago we actually that line was around 75,000, I believe, and each year we've brought that down a little bit more due to a new home instruction policy that we've been adhering to, so that's helped tremendously. This is more of a summative slide. You can see, as I mentioned earlier, our salaries are relatively flat from year to year. The equipment is relatively flat. The other operating costs and supplies represent some of the increases that I mentioned earlier in that overall area. And our BOCES services is a slight increase due to a couple of the mandates that I'll talk about in a few minutes. Our next slide shows you or demonstrates the positions that we have. You can see we have a lot of staff in our instructional program. It is the core of what we do. The principals and the staff and the supervisors and staff Just to let everyone know, we don't have 26 principals. That includes all of the clerical staff associated with each of the buildings as well. The other area I wanted to mention is the salary line items that are a result of the BCTA and the BPA concessions has helped to either lower our salaries from last year to this year or remain relatively flat. And this is another breakdown of the positions based on K3, 4, 6, and 7, 12. These are the instructional staff areas. This is how we have to report to the state for how our areas are broken up. And again, the salaries, if you total all those up, again, are relatively flat. There is an increase in our substitute teacher line, and that's due to a couple reasons. One, due to some of the new mandates from the state. We do have new standards, the Common Core state standards. We also have the APPR that I know many people have heard about, and there is training required for that during the year, so that's reflected as an increase to our substitute line. We also, in the past, for our sabbaticals and replacement teachers, had not had separate amounts allocated in the budget for those areas, so that's been added so we can accurately reflect what we're paying out for those specific areas. There's also professional development. Again, the increase is due to the reallocation that I mentioned earlier, as well as accounting for the sabbaticals. And also with the contract negotiations, we had a health insurance buyout for those people who wanted to opt out of health insurance, and that's reflected in these lines as well. So the two additions that Dr. Douglas had mentioned earlier, we already have Ames Web that we began implementing this year at the elementary. It's a reading assessment, a diagnostic universal screening, which is a requirement under the state for response to intervention. What we're planning on next year is to continue with that program and also add the math component, which is another requirement under response to intervention. The only reason that's an increase is because we were funding it through BOCES, Capital Region BOCES, and they contacted me recently and said they would no longer support that. So that cost is actually reflective of a cross contract that we have to do with another BOCES in the state. The Scholastic Reading Inventory, again, is part of the response to intervention requirement by the state, and that is about a $40,000, and that will be a universal screening next year at the middle school for all students. So I want to talk a little bit about our current enrollment at the elementary level. This data is actually from October. This is when we do our reporting to the state for our actual enrollment for one day in October. And you can see that in each of the buildings at the last column, you'll see the first number there. For example, in Eagle, that's the total number of classroom teachers. This does not include special area teachers that are assigned to Eagle currently this year. And then next to that, the 23.75 is an average of the student-teacher ratio for each of those buildings. So you can see where, anywhere in the range on the low end of 20 up to the high end at Slingerland's of 24.14. We have a total of 85 classroom teachers this year with an overall average student-teacher ratio of 22.96 and 1,952 students. For next year, we're still registering kindergarten students. We do that through May. So the kindergarten numbers are always something that we project as accurately as possible. However, you never know students who may come in later in the year, or especially during the summer, we tend to see an increase in registration at that time. But what we're projecting, you can see on the end, the last column shows you whether or not each of those buildings is expecting an increase or a decrease in students for next year. You can see on average, we're projecting to lose about 54 students, K-5, which is a significant number, and if you've looked at the long-range plan, that's a trend that we're seeing for the next several years. So for next year, we're expecting just under 1,900 students, and we're looking to hopefully maintain the same number of classroom teachers if we can, given the budget situation, to help with some of the sections that have become a little bit large, and I'll talk about those in just a few minutes. Middle school and high school are a little bit different. Obviously, there's not individual classroom teachers assigned to specific students like in the elementary school. So the staffing in each of the middle school and high school are reflective of each teacher and the number of students they're assigned during the course of the year. So this is broken up by departments, and what you'll see is the number of students. That first column, or the second column, sorry, reflects the number of students that are actually scheduled into those classes within those departments. The FTE is the full-time equivalent, and that's the number of teachers assigned within that department. And then the ratio is the student-teacher ratio. So for every one teacher, the ratio is the number of students that they're assigned over the course of the year. And the high school is a little bit, the departments are set up slightly differently, but they're reflective in the same way. And you can see that some of those are much higher. Those are often due to semester classes that meet on a little bit different schedule. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the potential reductions that the board could consider. And before I get into that, because this is always very difficult, and I know that it's not easy for you all to sit here listening to potential reductions. It's also not easy to be in charge of the instructional program up here recommending we reduce every single year. Unfortunately, given the state aid picture, we're forced to make decisions that we don't like to do, and certainly we're trying to do this with the students first, so we're not impacting them. I'm not saying we're not impacting them, I think we all know that, but to the least degree possible. So I want to highlight what the potential reductions are the board could consider, and these are reductions that would get us closer to the maximum allowable tax levy limit. It doesn't get us to that $1 million that Dr. Douglas had referred to in that prior chart. It gets us closer to that level, though. So the first consideration for the board is that both the middle school and high school have 2 full-time social workers. And in speaking with the principals and talking about this with the special ed department, we're proposing that the board consider that there's a 1.0 reduction between those 2 buildings. And I have down 0.5 and 0.5. However, given the students' needs or the needs of the building, that could vary. Could be 1.4 in one building, 1.6 in another building. That will depend on where things end up in special education and what the needs of the buildings are. What does that mean in regards to an impact? Certainly there's still 1.5 social workers in the building. It will require 1 social worker to travel between buildings. And it would also allow or force students to potentially seek out others should a need arise. Certainly if there's a crisis, that would be our first and utmost priority with students. That always is. Even now with the 2 full-time social workers, students would go to guidance, they may go to administration, they may seek out a teacher that they're comfortable with, but counseling would still happen. Groups may be a little bit larger. We do have small groups in social work, so that may have to happen, or they may have to be scheduled a little bit differently to make that happen. In some of the other areas, I'm going to kind of group these together because they all pretty much had the same impact. In art, language, the family and consumer sciences, English, and the science. These are all high school sections that would be reduced. And what the reductions would be is we looked at the student requests, because we do have those from the high school, and you would be looking at less elective offerings, particularly upper level electives that would either not be offered or there would be a reduction in the number of sections that will be offered. The impact that we've seen over the last couple of years with these reductions is that there are less offerings for students to take electives at the high school. So for example, a student will make a selection of a specific course that they would like to get into, or multiple courses. If they're closed out of those, or their schedule, another class conflicts with that, there's several students this year who were not able to get into another elective because they were all closed out. So this would essentially limit that, or force students to either take classes they're not really interested in perhaps, or take a study hall. So that would be the general impact of all of those reductions. The guidance reduction is a 0.4 at the high school, and what that would mean for the guidance department is an increase in caseload. So they would have more students that they're assigned. The one, I guess, positive, if you want to look at that, is that our senior class is relatively large. So we do have a larger senior class exiting, a smaller senior or freshman class coming in. So that may help to offset that a little bit, but essentially their caseloads would increase. The library reduction is actually at the middle school. We have 1.5 librarians currently at the middle school. And so what that would mean is they would end up with 1 full-time librarian and 1 support staff to assist in the library, which they currently have. What does that mean for the impact for students is that obviously the library will not be open all day long, as it has been in the past. I shouldn't say that. It will be open, but the librarian will not be accessible to the students all day long, or there may be times where classes are not able to go there because there's only 1 person who's able to actually assist them. And the last potential reduction that the board could consider, and this has come up over the last couple of years, at the high school level, is allowing students to not take physical education in lieu if they are participating in 2 or more sports, 2 or more athletic teams. The regulations allow for students in sophomore year and above to be able to not take physical education if they are an equivalent activity that meets the time requirements, and there's some other requirements associated with that. The reason I have a range there from 0.8 to 1.3 is because if we were to do this, this would be the first year we're actually doing this, so you're not really sure of the total number of students who might take advantage of it. We've looked at the numbers who currently, or from last year, participate in 2 or 3 sports, and there's about 160 to 170 students who participate in 2 or 3 sports. And that may sound like a lot of students, but when you actually break down the number of full-time equivalent teachers we have and the fact that phys ed is scheduled on alternating days, it's not a huge FTE reduction because, one, we're not sure if all those students, and likely not all those students, would take advantage of opting out of physical education. And we're not sure how the schedule will play out. So for right now, we're still working on numbers, so you probably would be looking at a 0.8 to perhaps, I think 1.3 is a little bit on the high end of that. The other thing with this particular reduction, if the board wishes to proceed with this, is that we do have in our wellness policy that athletics will not take the place of physical education, so that would have to be changed. This is the same chart that Dr. Douglas and Ms. Kehoe had gone over earlier. Essentially, those reductions I just presented get, as I said, get us closer to that Mattel rating, but do not get us there. But we have future presentations, and as Ms. Kehoe reviewed earlier, there were reductions for the board to consider from the previous presentation as well. However, so the next set of reductions I'm going to present would be, should we need to go below the 3.75s down to 3 or down to 2, these are other possibilities for the board to consider. These are potential considerations we've had in the past. There's also some different ones on here that we had not had on for potential reductions in the past.
Jody, before
Yes.
you go on, could you go back to the previous slide? Are some of those reductions kind of interrelated? They're all or none? I mean,
No, they're not interrelated. You could take, for example, you don't have to, in the foreign language reduction for 0.6, it doesn't have to be a full 0.6. It could be 0.2 or 0.4, but none of those are actually connected, meaning that if you take one, you have to take the others.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all separate. Okay, so as I said, these next potential reductions would be, should we need to go below the 3.75 and need additional reductions. The first set of reductions I'm going to talk about, the classroom teachers, art, music, and phys ed, are all related. Because the classroom teachers, there's a range up there. Looking at the enrollment, you could consider potentially 1 to 3 classroom teachers, and they would be right now based on enrollment at Eagle, Glenmont, and Hammergrell. The art and music and physical education are attached to those because all of the special areas in the elementary schools are assigned by the number of classroom sections in each building. Bless you. So if you, for example, were to reduce 1 teacher, you would potentially have, or 2 teachers, a 0.1 reduction in art. The 0.2 or the 0.30 are the high end. If you took all 3 of those classroom teachers reductions, that would be the maximum reductions that could be taken in the other areas. The savings on all of those are reflective of the high end. So the 3 classroom teachers, the $212,100 are if we were to reduce all 3 classroom teachers. The guidance program at the elementary is a non-mandated program. I'm not saying it's not essential, it's certainly essential, but it is non-mandated. We currently have 3 guidance counselors at our elementary to serve 5 buildings. So we have our guidance counselors actually travel between buildings. The impact of this obviously would be that the elementary schools, they don't have full-time social workers or psychologists in their buildings all the time, so their guidance counselors are people that deal with a lot of issues that come up. They do a lot of programming regarding bullying and whatnot. So that would be the impact of that, is we would have to look at how do we actually still maintain some of those programs, or perhaps we don't maintain some of those programs at the elementary level. You could consider 1, you could consider 3. The one challenge I would say in regards to that, with only 3 counselors, if you reduce 1 or 2, it'd be very difficult for 1 counselor to effectively service 5 elementary schools. The next reduction is actually at the middle school. Currently, the middle school has a 9-period day. And what this would do is we would actually be reducing the middle school day to an 8-period day. Each of the time periods would be approximately 53 minutes, so the class periods would actually lengthen slightly. And foreign language, French and Spanish, Chinese, physical education are actually above the state mandate. And this is where we're getting into, looking at non-mandated areas first. And what that would do is that would take PE and foreign language, which students take every single day, and that would combine it into 1 period on alternating days. So therefore, the day would actually be the same time frame as the 7th and 8th graders, but their schedules would be different and their length of their periods would be longer. And then last year we did have on the reductions, a 20% reduction in co-curriculars. I believe that was maybe a tier 3 reduction. We did take a 10% reduction at both the middle school and high school last year in the co-curricular areas. So this would be the next step up from that, a 20% reduction in both of the schools. And some of the impacts, obviously, the more staff we reduce, you've heard Dr. Douglas mention we've lost 120 staff members, we've lost over 60 faculty members over the last several years. With that, I think we all know you're getting larger class sizes. It's not uncommon for us to have class sizes of 30 or above at the secondary level. At the elementary, we have some class sections, 27, 28 currently. That's relatively high for elementary. I already mentioned the electives and sections at the high school, that we have less offerings of those, so students don't have as many options or are taking study halls in lieu of electives. I had reported this, I think, in the fall or maybe last year about the slight decline I'm seeing in state testing performance, both in 3 through 8 and Regents. When you have larger class sizes, you just can't, as much as teachers try, you can't get as much individualized attention to the students who need that. Special ed performance has also decreased significantly. I think we've seen about a 3 or 5% overall reduction in their performance on state assessments. And this goes back to the remedial groups. Because we've reduced in some of these areas, those groups have gotten larger. Because our students aren't performing quite as well, we have more students who actually need some additional assistance in remediation. And then obviously we have a lot of new mandates. You've heard about that tonight. Response to intervention, APPR, the online assessments that are all coming at us, and those combined with all of the reductions, I think have created a lot of not only stress, but a lot of demands on all of our faculty and staff here.
Can I ask a question? Jody?
Yes.
The combined foreign language and physical education, would that just be for 6th grade then?
It would only be for 6th grade.
Okay.
Correct.
I had are you done?
Yep.
The high school section staffing 2012-13, where you get the ratios there, does that
Correct.
include the lab school?
Yes.
Okay, so they're factored into there.
Yes.
On the next slide, the potential instruction reductions at the Mattel. The foreign language, is that are you at liberty to say, is that a particular language, or is that across the board, or do you know?
Well, the numbers right now in regards to course request, the numbers of French requests are down. So I don't know if all 0.6 of that would just be in French, or there could be a 0.4 in French and a 0.2 in Spanish.
Okay. And at the library reduction at the middle school, if that were to go, if the board were to decide it and put it up on the budget, what if any role do teachers have when they take their classes down to the library? Could teachers potentially fill in some of that, either whether it's supervision or assistance level, or is it a totally different ballgame?
Well, teachers teachers don't just send their students to the library now. So if they schedule time in the library, let's say they're doing research, which is very common, the librarian may do some instruction in the different databases that are available. The teachers are there working with the kids and the librarian. The potential issue I was indicating with regards to being able to access the library is more that if you only have one librarian there and there's one class or 2 classes already in there, they can't allow 3 or 4 classes in there at a time. They just can't manage that, even with the teachers working with them.
All right, thank you.
Jody, back at the first slide you had, can you give us some information on the increase in the budget for career and technical ed?
Yes, that is actually due to AP. I'm not sure how it got in here, but the career and technical ed. This slide?
Yeah.
Yes. The career and technical ed, that went up because in this year's budget, the AP exams that we offer were not accounted for in the budget. They had been though they had not been accounted for in the past, so that was added. Again, I just got some information on this today. So I'm not sure why it got put in the career and technical ed category, but if you put it in curriculum development, it would be the same increase. It's about $75,000 increase that needed to be accounted for in the budget. Any other questions?
Ladies and gentlemen of the Board of Education and honored guests who are here tonight as well. Obviously, no budget ever paints the rosiest pictures, especially over the past several years. This is still a work in progress, as you can see, depending on many decisions that are yet to be made, as well as multiple issues of trying to figure out what our final state aid picture will be. That state aid picture is in a state of flux as well between now and most likely the end of the month. One of the things the district has done is ask for its community residents, as they start to hear this information, is to avail themselves of our recent SNN as well as the information on our website for advocacy. We try to explain it there, so we won't go into a lot of it tonight, but everyone here is trying to do everything they can to preserve one of the most sacred trusts, our students, our education of that youth for a greater tomorrow. That's part of the advocacy message, as well as the fact of making sure people are paying attention to what's going on. The 7 members of the Board of Education have some of the toughest jobs coming forward to them over the next 30 to 40 days. And it's not easy to look at this time and time again. But we are trying to, as you can see from some of our discussions, hold this back as much as possible from the programmatic offerings that we've widely been able to offer. It's not an easy task. We are at that point that we have talked about that many districts across the state are facing, and some are facing a much greater than ours situation tonight. But it is that emphasis that we are trying to communicate to give us the best information from the community so that the board can understand from the community as well, where do we end up balancing this out at the end result? What education in Bethlehem is known for? What is the community's expectation? So we appreciate everyone coming out. Up here you see, we usually put up our future meetings on our budget. We do remind everybody of the capital facility referendum to vote on 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. on March 12th, that's next Tuesday. We're asking for people to just come out and vote. That's our biggest job, is to make sure people participate. In addition, our next budget meeting will be on special education and transportation. That'll be on March 20th. It will be here as well. Then on April 17th, it says budget adopted by the board. That may be tentative. We may need an extra night to discuss. So please check this or our website as we go through. It's a discussion that will probably take place on the evening of the 20th with the board. We do know that we must adopt a budget, I believe, by the drop dead date for us comfortably is April 23rd. So you may see an extra Board of Education meeting in there strictly for that opportunity for the board to buy as much time to get the most accurate information, and hopefully the budget from the state is not late, which could even confuse things even more. Then obviously, once the budget is adopted on whatever date, we have the May 8th public hearing on the proposed budget. That's for open comments. This is really now the budget work sessions for the board to discuss this openly. And then of course, the May 21st statewide unified voting date for all district elections across New York State. Please be aware of that, and we look forward to hearing the dialogue from the community as we go forward as well. Any other questions from the Board of Education? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Douglas. And I think we wanted to go back for public comment, and I know I want to get Ms. Monroe out of here. So if there's anybody just has questions first for her in the community, if you'd like to come up, and any other ones we can just kind of wait till when she leaves. Hi, Karen.
Hello, hi, I'm Karen Kissinger. I've got a high schooler and a middle schooler. Jody, I was wondering if the middle school goes to 8 periods in 6th grade, does that mean they lose their home base?
No.
Okay. And we saw the enrollment numbers changing for the elementary school by about 50 students. Do you know what the high school and middle school enrollment numbers look like?
Middle school is staying just about flat. It's almost identical, and the high school is losing about 30 to 40 students.
Because I'm thinking a lot of the cuts were at the middle school and high school level, but it seems like that's where we're losing fewer students than at the elementary level.
Right. However, we have some elementary classroom sections because of past reductions that are up there, so we were hoping to not have to make those so that we could potentially bring down a few of those sections. If we can't, then we can't. But, you know, particularly 1st and 4th grade for next year look fairly high already.
And I know it's also hard to cut in elementary because you may be losing 50 kids, but it's 2 in one grade and 3 in another.
Right.
Thanks.
David Cooper, I have a question in terms of, I know you talked about the potential reductions at the MATL, but isn't that offset by your budget increasing? Because your budget actually increased, right? Your year-to-year budget for K-12.
Slightly.
Slightly. So
Yeah.
it's not, I mean, in terms of getting to the $1 million, it's increasing, but we're also,
No,
I mean, that
'cause-
393, it's not a true 393 because your budget's going up, right?
Well, no, because that increase is already factored into those
Okay.
amounts.
Okay. In terms of, I had a question about the library and the library cuts. I'm curious how they impacted it this year, and also, I mean, we went over this last year. We're talking about servicing 1,200 students in the middle school with one librarian. That seems a little.
None of these
Yeah.
cuts, reductions are easy. And I think that there definitely has been some impact this year in regards to, access to the librarians at both the middle and high school. I think the librarians have done a great job, really making it work and still being accessible to students. However, when we're forced to make some of these reductions, these are some of the choices, unfortunately, that we have to make.
Would it impact the librarians in terms of them moving around? They already move around a lot, or would it just be a half cut in the middle school, and they wouldn't move around more? Because right now, I know what the different.
Yeah, there's not really much flexibility to move around more.
Okay. And then the last comment I have is just in terms of the guidance program in the elementary school. I really think that's really, really important, and it's not a lot of, it's some money, but I think that's something you really should take a hard look before you cut it. I know banana splits is really important to a lot of the kids, as well as the PALS program. I mean, there's a number of programs those guidance counselors do, and I'm thankful. I know at my school, our guidance counselor does an excellent job. So I just hate to see that go. And and as you said, there's no social worker or psychologist in the building. That's part of what they're doing. So I know you're not there yet, but I just want to throw that out there. I don't know what point we say, but.
Thank you, Dave.
It's really an honor to address the Board of Education and to thank you.
Just state your name for the. Oh, sorry.
Right, I'm nice. My name is Ellen Driscoll. I have worked for the district for 10 years. 10 very excellent years. I am in charge of the first classroom of the day and the last classroom of the day. I'm a school bus driver. This year I drive for the high school, middle school, and Ellesmere Elementary. I love my job. I've learned so much in this job about the importance of education. I feel very passionate about it. And that's why I want everyone behind me to see this statement. And I've printed up more of these. If anyone agrees with me, please share it with the board. Okay? I just want to encourage you to be strong, to allow the community the opportunity to think deeply about our core values and to dig deeply to support the excellence that this district has become over years and years of commitment and really hard work by so many out here, teachers, principals, folks, support folks. So I just want to encourage you to be strong. And thank you for all this work putting this together. And before we all start getting so embroiled in details, are we really going to cut this? Are we really going to do that? Let's just step back once and look at what we're doing. We are taking it on our backs to try to meet these numbers, when perhaps some of this energy and focus should be bringing it back to the governor's office and to the government and saying, whoa, what about this gap elimination, what do you call it, assistance thing?
Adjustment.
Please, let's spend that. We need the money. Come on. I want to share with you one more thing about this energy and commitment. Down at Transportation, we had an emergency meeting about all the budget cuts. And we really saw that, whoa, it was time to just drop all our stuff, little differences and our little worries about ourselves, and link arms, all of us together, and do something political. To start like a phone frenzy of calling, and thank you very much for putting that on the website, all the names and numbers of our representatives in the governor's office. We should be calling. I mean, write up a statement and be able to read it on the phone to these people about what we want them to do. Excuse me, no taxation without representation. What do we really want to see happen? We need to fight for what we know is right. And we should not be battling with these numbers and dragging down the quality of the future of our society, of our community, of our children, okay? Because the future is not money. The future is our children and their education, and that is really the future. Oh, I feel so much better getting that off my chest. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Rita LeVay, and I'm nice to see you all again. I wanted to come this evening because I really wanted to speak to the social work issue. As you know, my background is in mental health, and I've worked in the district a number of years. I remember when we first really began with the social workers and the importance that we all felt regarding those positions. And I know that it's very difficult. The cuts are very deep, they're very difficult. I know that, and I appreciate the tough position you're all in. But I would like you to think back to why we put those positions in the first place. Those social workers have helped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students. We had a large number of students with mental health problems. 1 out of every 5 of the students in our district have mental health problems each year. That's true across the country. And a number of our students, 1 out of every 7 across the country as well, in New York State, make a plan for suicide. They don't carry it out, but they make those plans. It's really critical, and I understand the difficulty, but I would like you to think back and consider that cut. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Make sure in the comment period, not in question period still. We moved
I think we're kind of in both, because we changed it from the beginning of the meeting.
Rule of order guy. I want to say
No, we had to switch it back because we wanted to have Jody do the presentation before, so we're...
My name is David Rounds. I'm president of Bethlehem Central Teachers Association. And as members of the board, you've been boxed into a corner. You were boxed into a corner about 4 years ago when the governors decided to start doing the gap elimination adjustment. It was supposed to be a short-term fix to a budget problem, and now it's extended into its 4th year. The amount of money by law that this school district is supposed to be getting is not arriving here. Okay, if you take a look at the $5 million that is the shortfall of $5 million, if you look at that, you take the $3.8 million gap elimination adjustment, you add the other $600,000 plus dollars that the state of New York cut from our budget this year, and you're almost at the $5 million. Math is not my specialty, but I guarantee the tax rate would probably be around 1% or so if all the money that the state of New York is supposed to be providing to this school district were here. 1%. There's not a single person in this room that would not support a budget that was 1%. The board has done its job in the past. You've made the difficult decisions. You've cut programs that you did not want to cut because you were forced into it. Okay? The members of this community made decisions they didn't want to make. Okay? Everybody in here would love lower tax rates, but they made the tough decisions to do the supermajority last year because they cared about their schools and they thought it was the right thing. The unions in the school district did their part. If you take a look at the salary layout from year to year, it's almost flat. Okay, every person in this room has done their job. It's the state of New York that has not, and specifically the governor. Okay, out of the blue, the high tax aid being adjusted and having to cut 70% is just downright wrong. If you had a heads up a year ago that that was going to occur, maybe you could have planned for it. But at the last minute, you receive your budget and $600,000 is gone that you were expecting to be there. It's just simply not right. And the previous speaker is absolutely on the money. For the first time, our state legislators are starting to stand up to the governor a little bit. Okay? The fact that the budget hasn't been passed yet is a good thing, because the governor's used to getting his way and rolling over the politicians. The leaders get in that room, they make the deal, and nobody has a comment on it. The fact that the budget is delayed is a good thing, because it means they're actually discussing the issues a little bit. So I'd urge every single person in this room to keep the pressure on, because this room, this board has been boxed in by a governor and by a state legislator who are not fulfilling the duties to the students of this state. The money is out there. Okay, the governor proposed $50 million last year, $50 million for grant programs. He awarded $17 million of that $50 million. Now, unfortunately, this school district's not eligible for a penny because we don't meet any of the needs of it. But those high-need school districts who did apply for it, there was almost $200 million worth of applications. $17 million was awarded out of the $50 million. Okay, the money that went to this was supposed to go to New York City. $200 million was supposed to go to New York City. The governor took that money away. He just took that money away, didn't reassign it to schools. He put it back into the general budget, okay, so that he could cover other expenses. So it is my opinion that every single person in this room, on behalf of this community and themselves, has an obligation to contact your local politicians. I know the members of the teachers union has sent over 400 letters this week alone, personalized letters to each of the local politicians. Pat Fahey, our local assembly person, next Friday, not this Friday. Friday, from I believe 8:30 to 10 o'clock in the morning, is going to be at the Four Corners Luncheonette. Okay, if you're available, I encourage you to go here. And it's the same thing. Give her the courage to keep fighting this. Okay, all of our local politicians, they finally have a little bit momentum behind them where they can start to fight the governor on it, and every little penny helps. Okay, now, in terms of what we can do, you've been boxed into a corner. You have a decision between bad, worse, and catastrophic. Okay, even if you go out at the tax cap levy, which the law allows, it's what Dr. Douglas said nicely before, it's what the governor says is a reasonable amount to go out at, we're still talking about cuts. Okay? There are no more cuts in this school district that don't have an impact on the quality of education anymore. Okay? We are not talking about trimming fat. We are talking about getting rid of electives. We're talking about getting rid of mental health experts. There is no more fat to trim, but that's the decision you've been forced into. Given the fact that you've been forced into these situations, I urge you to make the best of those decisions. There's a lot of pressures on you to adjust the tax rate lower and lower and lower. I would encourage you to present a budget to this community that I'm certain they would support. And that's the one that is at that tax levy amount.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Do you want to head out? Thank you.
Just building on building on Mr. Rounds' statement, you know, I would encourage you as well. Four Corners can use the business as well that morning, so as many that can show up. I know Assemblywoman Fahey is in her first year, and I will tell you, the first year senators and assemblymen right now are really standing up across the state. But I know Assemblywoman Fahey has made it known. She sent us a letter today. She would like to come in and sit down and meet with the board. The question is availability. I am going to propose for the 20th of March for that meeting to see first if that is available, and then if not, the 17th. So it's also coinciding with a board night. I know on the political efforts of the board, we have a meeting next Tuesday, the 11th, is one of our major lobby days that, even though it's a school board lobby day, the more they hear from you down on the Capitol, either on the concourse, even outside the legislative chambers themselves, the better it is, because they are, as Mr. Rounds put it, gathering strength across the state to finally stand up after 3 years. So any efforts, a call, a letter. If you've sent one, take a week, send another. If you've called 1 week, call again. If you've talked to a staffer, that's good too. They keep track of everything. They represent you, and they want to hear from you so that they can hopefully band together and represent the state. So thank you for your efforts, and thank you for the BCTA as well as the BCUEA, and on top of it, our community members that are also meeting the call that we've put out.
And to echo what you just said, Dr. Douglas, I'd even encourage our participation in government students to even write letters. Maybe you could do that as a group project. Also, I agree, for the past several years, all we've done is painful cuts. I mean, from closing a school, moving the district office, just unbelievable amount of cuts that we've had to do. And everybody's doing their part. I think everyone in our school district has taken some type of concession or pay freeze, and they're doing it without griping. And not only are they taking reductions, I mean, they're working a lot harder. And when Ms. Monroe was saying the APPR, the RTI, the SLOs, the Common Core, I mean, just so much stress has gone on the teachers. So I just wanted to make sure I thanked everybody in the Bethlehem School District, because you really are committing to excellence. And then we have, just, it's 8:57, I think we might be able to get through the agenda before, so we don't have to take the break. Finance, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following finance actions, items A through C.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries.
You want to thank the donation?
Yeah, you write letters to them.
Yes, we write letters for every donation.
For the Golf Booster Club, okay. Professional personnel, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following instructional staff action items A through C. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. The what? Oh, okay, congratulations, Sal, on your tenure. Just approved. Support personnel, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following support staff action item. Oh, there isn't any.
That's good. I just noticed the none.
None. Sorry about that. Correspondence for action is make sure there's one there. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following correspondence action item A.
So moved.
Second.
It's a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That carries. Item 11. Okay, for visitors, I think we already did this. We combined that. Unless anybody has something on a non-agenda item. Okay. And then future meetings, I think Dr. Douglas already went over, and I just want to just state that the board is having a retreat on March 19th for self-evaluation, which from New York State School Board Association is going to help facilitate that.
And that will be closed, that will be a
Right.
closed retreat for the board.
Okay, and then we did, and then just again, make sure people get out there to vote on March 12th. And we have no need to go to an executive session, so is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out.
Come back. We should have this turn on every time.
It's easier.
Yeah.